all started early that morning, around 6:22 a.m., when the first rays of sunlight peeked over the Phoenix Sky Harbor runway. The terminal buzzed with the familiar morning rush, rolling suitcases, weary travelers clutching oversized coffees, and kids dragging tired feet behind parents who looked like they hadn't slept in days. Right in the middle of this chaos stood Emery Tillman, early 40s, dark brown skin, neatly trimmed beard, with a calm, confident presence that made him seem a few steps ahead of everyone else without even trying. He adjusted the strap on his duffel bag and silently handed his boarding pass to the gate agent. "Morning, Mr. Tillman," she greeted with a polite smile, scanning his pass. "You're all set. Enjoy your flight." He nodded once, efficient, not cold, and made his way toward the jet bridge. Emery wasn't in a hurry. He didn't have earbuds in yet, just quietly observing the scene around him. 3 teenagers taking selfies by the window, an older couple quietly debating if they locked their door, a woman in a pink floral blouse whispering rapidly into her phone. Every detail logged automatically. This was no paranoia, just years of training. But this wasn't work. This was his off switch. He'd just wrapped up a federal surveillance operation in Tempe less than 18 hours earlier. No headlines, no action movie drama, just weeks of quiet, steady work. Wiretaps, stakeouts, court orders. The kind of work nobody thanks you for, but that keeps the whole system from falling apart. Settling into his seat, 14A, window side, with plenty of room for his briefcase, Emery pulled out his noise-canceling headphones, exhaled deeply, and let the steady hum of the engines take over. Then, just as he was getting comfortable, a voice cut through. A woman in her mid-50s, with blonde highlights and a hint of too much perfume, stood hesitantly in the aisle, clutching a designer tote. "I think you're in my seat," she said. Emery looked up, calm, but confused. He checked his boarding pass and showed it to her. 14A, window. She glanced at hers and stiffened. "Oh, I'm 14B," she muttered, sliding into the middle seat with a forced smile. They hadn't even left the gate yet, but the atmosphere shifted, subtle, like the room heating up just enough for you to notice. The woman was tense, clutching her bag as if it held something fragile, stealing quick glances at Emery before snapping her head forward again. He ignored it, having dealt with worse, in courtrooms, restaurants, all kinds of places. Most days, it just rolled off. He powered down his phone and closed his eyes. Suddenly, she tapped his armrest. "Excuse me, would you mind?" Her gesture was vague, directed at his briefcase under the seat. "Is it in your way?" he asked. "No, never mind," she said quickly, offering a tight smile that he didn't return. Across the aisle, a young man in a hoodie watched the exchange. Trevin, a student from Northern Arizona University heading home for a cousin's wedding. He raised an eyebrow at Emery as if to ask, "You good?" Emery gave a short nod. Then, as the pilot's voice filled the cabin with the usual welcome and flight info, Emery noticed the woman's hand trembling slightly while fastening her seatbelt. She glanced nervously toward the back of the plane, then forward to the cockpit. She wasn't just a nervous flyer. She pressed the call button. When the flight attendant leaned in, she whispered urgently, "I don't want to be a bother, but could I be reseated?" "Is there something wrong with your seat, ma'am?" the attendant asked. The woman leaned closer, voice low but urgent. "No, it's not that. I just don't feel safe sitting here. This man," she gestured ever so slightly toward Emery, "he's been acting strangely." Emery didn't react. He stared out the window, as if he hadn't heard a thing, but inside, his stomach clenched. The flight attendant looked surprised. "He hasn't done anything, right?" she asked quietly. No, the woman replied quickly. "But something feels off. I'm a mother. I trust my gut." The attendant shifted uneasily. "Let me speak to the lead," she said. The woman nodded, lips pressed tight. Emery finally turned his head and looked directly at her. His voice was low, but firm. "You should be careful what you imply, ma'am." She jumped slightly. "I didn't mean anything. I just want to feel comfortable on my flight." He didn't respond, and didn't have to. Soon the attendant returned with someone else, and that's when things began to change. The new arrival walked down the aisle with unmistakable authority. Late 30s, curly brown hair pulled into a tight bun, no nonsense expression. Her name tag read, Callie, Flight Service Manager. Her eyes scanned the row even before she reached them. "Good morning," she said with professional calm. "I understand there's been a concern?" The woman in 14B perked up. "Yes, I just don't feel comfortable where I'm seated. I know it's last minute, but maybe there's another option available for safety?" Callie's eyes narrowed slightly. She'd heard this story before. "Is the seat broken?" she asked. "No," the woman admitted in a lowered voice. "It's the passenger next to me. I think he might be hiding something." Callie turned her gaze to Emery. He sat calm, silent, but his eyes met hers with something sharper than annoyance. Not anger, more like calculation, as if he already knew how this would play out and was waiting for everyone else to catch up. Callie cleared her throat. "Sir, would you please verify your boarding pass?" Emery didn't blink. "Sure." He pulled it from his pocket and handed it over. She scanned it. 14A, no issues." The woman crossed her arms. "I never said there's a problem with the seat. I just think we should be cautious. You never know who might be trying to slip past security. He hasn't said a word since I sat down. Not one word." "That's not a crime," Emery replied dryly. "I didn't say it was," she snapped, flustered. Callie's professional mask slipped just a bit. "Ma'am, I need something specific to reassign seats, especially in priority boarding. Has this passenger threatened you in any way?" The woman looked around and noticed passengers were now watching. A teenager in row 15 paused his music. A woman across the aisle leaned in, listening. "No," she said hurriedly. "But he's got this case under the seat and won't say what's inside. When I asked if he could move it, he was cold and silent. You can't tell me that's not suspicious." Callie turned back to Emery. "What's in the case, sir?" "Work documents," he said plainly. "Private. May I take a quick look inside?" She held his gaze. "Are you asking as TSA?" Callie hesitated. "No, sir. Just flight crew, ensuring comfort." He nodded slowly and calmly. "Then no." The woman scoffed, exasperated. "See? He's hiding something. I knew it. Something's not right." A man in 13C spun around. "Lady, you asked him to move a briefcase, and now you're accusing him of what exactly?" "I'm not accusing anyone," she shot back. "I just want to be safe. You're assuming things because you're nervous." The man blinked, caught off guard. "I think I'd like to speak to the captain," she said, more forceful now. "If something happens midair and I said nothing, I wouldn't forgive myself." Emery shifted slightly in his seat, then spoke for the first time in a while. "Is there a supervisor or air marshal on board? Because this is escalating fast, over absolutely nothing." Callie looked torn, but said, "I'll call ground. Captain will be informed. We're still at the gate." She disappeared toward the front. The woman leaned back, arms crossed. "Some people get really defensive when you ask simple questions," she muttered. Emery looked away, jaw tight. He didn't want to speak, not now, not until someone with real authority arrived. What she didn't know, and what everyone was about to discover, would silence the whole cabin. Less than 5 minutes later, the captain's attention was caught by the delay. A uniformed airline supervisor stepped aboard through the front cabin. His badge read J. Bernard, broad-shouldered salt and pepper goatee, clipboard in hand, walking with a no-nonsense air, like he didn't want to be there, but was ready to handle it swiftly. Close behind him came a Phoenix police officer, not TSA, not federal, just local law enforcement, the standard protocol for pre-flight disturbances. Bernard stopped at row 14 and scanned the passengers. "Who made the report?" he asked flatly. "I did," said the woman in 14B, raising her hand with a bit too much urgency. "I didn't want to escalate things, but I honestly don't feel safe. I'm not saying he's done anything wrong, but he's acting off and evasive." Emery didn't move or flinch. He sat back, hands resting calmly in his lap. Bernard turned to him. "Sir, we'd like to ask you to deplane so we can speak with you briefly." Am I being removed? Emery asked calmly. We just need you to step off and speak with security. It'll only take a minute, the officer replied. Passengers nearby were fully tuned in now. Even folks several rows back glanced over their shoulders. For what reason? Emery's voice stayed steady. We received a report of suspicious behavior, the officer said. Emery took a slow breath, then reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out a sleek black leather ID case. With one smooth motion, he opened it, revealing a gold badge with a blue seal and clear lettering, Federal Bureau of Investigation. He turned it toward the officer, who stepped back half a pace to read it. Emery D. Tillman, Senior Special Agent, Organized Crime Division. You could have heard a pin drop. Emery closed the badge and looked directly at Bernard. I'm returning home from a classified assignment. I boarded this flight quietly. I've done nothing to warrant removal or questioning. Before you continue, you might want to radio TSA to confirm my credentials, or check with the Bureau. Either works. The officer glanced at Bernard, who said nothing. The woman beside him went pale. I didn't know, she stammered. You didn't say anything. You didn't identify yourself. I don't have to, Emery interrupted calmly but firmly. Not unless I'm acting in an official capacity, which I wasn't. I was simply trying to get home. Callie returned from the front of the plane. The captain's waiting for word. Should we hold the door? No, Bernard said quickly, rubbing the back of his neck. Let's confirm and clear it. Emery looked at the officer. You have a radio? The officer, now clearly realizing what was unfolding, nodded. Yes, sir. Give me 2 minutes. He stepped toward the front. The woman in 14B opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. Murmurs spread among the passengers. A couple of quiet chuckles, and someone whispered, She messed with the wrong one. Emery sat quietly, badge tucked back into his jacket. He didn't gloat or smile. His expression said it all. You did this to yourself. But just because the badge was out didn't mean the damage was undone, and that was about to become painfully clear. 2 minutes later, the officer returned. His tone completely changed. Agent Tillman, you're confirmed, he said quietly, almost embarrassed. We've also been advised to thank you for your service and let you continue without further delay. Emery didn't nod or respond. He looked down, tightened his seatbelt, and shifted to face the window again. The officer leaned toward Bernard. Need anything else from him? Bernard shook his head. No, we're good. They both turned and started back up the aisle. Callie gave Emery a short, quiet look, somewhere between regret and apology, but said nothing. She turned to the woman in 14B instead. Do you still want to be moved? The woman didn't answer. Her hand gripped her tote so tightly her knuckles nearly whitened. She stared at the floor, frozen. Callie waited a beat. Okay then. She disappeared toward the front. The silence around row 14 felt heavy. People pretended not to look, but it was clear they were listening, the kind of awkward attention you can feel even when no one's looking directly. Emery took off his headphones and set them in his lap. He wasn't visibly angry, just drained, tired in a way that didn't come from lack of sleep. Trevon, the student across the aisle, leaned in slightly. Man, I'm sorry you had to go through that, he said low, so only Emery could hear. Emery glanced over. It's not new, he replied. Just louder today. Trevon shook his head. Still, it's crazy how fast they jump to conclusions. If you'd been wearing a hoodie and sweats like me, they probably would have brought a second cop. Emery gave a half smile that didn't reach his eyes. Then the woman next to him finally spoke. I didn't mean to offend you. He didn't turn to her. You didn't offend me. She seemed relieved, until he added, You profiled me. She froze. You assumed things about me based on how I looked, not what I did, not what I said, because I didn't say anything. You saw a black man in a quiet seat with a serious look and a black case, and your mind filled in the blanks. He spoke sharply now. I just felt uncomfortable. That's not a reason to label someone dangerous. Your feelings don't equal facts, and your fear doesn't give you the right to drag someone through a public scene. A pause hung in the air after the word interrogation. The woman in 14B said weakly, I'm a mother. From behind, A calm voice responded, "So am I." Heads turned to see a woman in 15D, early 30s, Latina, holding a baby. She had been quiet until now, but something in her tone made everyone listen. "I've got a kid in my lap and a diaper bag under my seat," she said firmly. "You didn't ask me what was in my bag. Why? Because I don't look suspicious." The woman in 14B blinked, stunned. The mom continued, calm but direct, "You didn't just ask for a seat change, you made a silent accusation. And now we're all 30 minutes late because you couldn't sit beside a black man without convincing yourself he was a threat." No one in the row spoke after that. The seatbelt sign lit up, engines roared to life, and the plane began taxiing. But the real change was in the woman's face. Maybe, just maybe, the message was finally sinking in. Takeoff came and went with the usual tilt and rumble. Emery sat still, eyes closed, letting the drone of the engines do what his headphones couldn't. Quiet the noise inside his head. Not the plane, not the woman next to him, the noise that always followed moments like this. He knew how it looked. A composed black man with credentials, a clean resolution, a moment of public correction. But it wasn't victory, not to him. Moments like this didn't vanish when the wheels left the ground. The woman in 14B hadn't spoken since. She had curled slightly inward, as if trying to disappear. Her earlier confidence gone, she looked small and alone, still clutching her tote like a lifeline. Trevin, the student across the aisle, had gone back to his music but kept glancing over with a look that said, "I see you, man." Quiet solidarity. Respect. 35 minutes into the flight, the silence broke. Agent Tillman opened his eyes as Callie, the flight attendant, returned. She held a folded piece of paper and a cup of water. "The captain wanted to make sure you're okay," she said softly. "And he asked me to give you this." Emery took the paper. It was handwritten. "We're sorry this happened on our aircraft. It shouldn't have. Thank you for your professionalism. Welcome aboard. Captain Joe Tanner." He didn't smile but nodded. "Appreciate it." Callie nodded back, then looked past him toward 14B and hesitated. "Is there anything else you need?" she asked politely, but not to the woman. Emery shook his head. "No, I'm good." Callie moved on. A few rows back, whispers started again. Someone mentioned lawsuits. Another muttered, "Public embarrassment." Emery didn't care. He didn't want anything. Not compensation, not an apology, not even understanding. Then something unexpected happened. The woman spoke again, quiet and careful, no longer defensive. "I didn't know you were FBI," she said. He looked at her. "You shouldn't have to know," he replied. She stared for a moment. "I guess I just got scared. That's all." He nodded slowly. "And when you're scared, who do you think is the threat?" She opened her mouth but closed it again. "I'm not trying to make you feel worse," he added. "But this wasn't just a mistake. It was a choice. You had a moment where you could have seen me as a person, and you didn't." "I've never done anything like this before," she whispered. "That doesn't mean it wasn't wrong." He let silence settle, not as punishment, just truth. "You know," she said finally, "people talk about this stuff on the news, and I always thought, that can't really happen. But I guess it does." He gave a soft shrug. "Now you know." There was no anger in his voice, no bitterness, just honesty. She turned slightly in her seat, not enough to meet his eyes, but enough to show she'd stopped avoiding the conversation. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "Not because you're FBI, but because I see it now." Emery didn't respond. He just looked out the window again. Sometimes silence is the only reply that matters, but the moment didn't end in that seat. It followed them down the aisle and all the way to the gate. Touchdown in St. Louis came with the usual bump and screech as the plane rolled toward the gate. Seatbelt signs clicked off before the overhead light even dimmed. Overhead bins popped open. Passengers began the familiar shuffle, stretching, checking phones, pretending the last 2 hours hadn't been heavy. Emery stayed seated, as always. He waited until the aisle cleared a bit, then stood, grabbed his briefcase, and joined the slow procession toward the front. At the exit row, Kelly was waiting. "Hope the rest of your day is better than this flight," she said quietly. He gave a nod. "Appreciate your professionalism." Just behind him, the woman from 14B stepped off too. Her name, Emery had overheard, was Rhonda Blake. She hadn't said much since her apology, but her eyes had changed. Outside the jet bridge, the mood had softened a bit. Families waited with hugs and signs, businessmen checked watches, and a little girl clutched her teddy bear, scanning every face for the one she knew. Life was moving on like nothing had happened, but Rhonda didn't walk away. She stayed by the gate, shifting awkwardly on her heels, watching Emery. He passed by her once, twice, then finally paused. "You're not waiting for someone," he said. "No," she admitted. "I just didn't want to leave it like that." He turned fully to face her, briefcase hanging at his side. She spoke slowly, weighing every word. "I've been thinking about it the whole flight. I thought saying sorry would fix everything, but it didn't. Not for me." Emery stayed silent, listening. She glanced around, lowering her voice. "The truth is, when I sat next to you, I was uncomfortable. From the moment I saw you, before you said a word, before you moved. And that wasn't about you. That was about me." That got his attention, she continued, voice cracking just a little. "I don't think of myself as racist, but I didn't need to say a slur to act on bias. I didn't have to yell or curse. I just needed to assume the worst, and I did." People passed by without noticing, but her eyes stayed locked on his. "I raised 2 kids," she added. "Tried to teach them right. And then I acted like this, in front of people, in front of you. I didn't even realize how easy it was to accuse someone I didn't know." Emery finally spoke. "You said you felt unsafe. But what you felt wasn't safety," he replied. "It was control. You weren't afraid of what I was doing. You were afraid of what I could do, based on nothing." She nodded slowly. "I deserved to be embarrassed. Maybe I needed it." He studied her for a moment, searching for any signs of insincerity. There were none. "And I want to do better," she said, "if that means anything." Emery broke the silence. "Then start with the people who look like you. Talk to them. Call it out when you see it. That's how things change." She exhaled, like it was the first time she'd thought of that. Then she extended her hand. He looked down at it, then back at her face, and shook it. One firm grip, 1 second. Nothing more. No cameras, no announcements, just a moment. Then he turned, walked toward the escalators, and disappeared into the crowd. But the real power of that moment wouldn't be seen at the gate. It would be felt the next time someone like Rhonda decided to speak up instead of look away. By the time Emery reached the rideshare pickup, the morning sun in St. Louis had sharpened, cutting through the haze of everything that had just happened. He set his briefcase down, loosened his collar, and checked his phone. A text from his wife waited at the top. "Call me when you land. The kids want to say hi." He smiled, for real this time. Not the practiced, polite smile he wore when the world was watching, but a real one. The kind that comes from remembering what grounds you after a storm. Behind him, people rushed by. Drivers honked, families reunited, others hurried to baggage claim before the belt stopped. No one knew what had gone down on Flight 2894. No one saw the weight still hanging in the air. But Emery felt it. He wasn't angry anymore, not really. He was used to these moments, too used to them. But what stayed with him this time wasn't the accusation, or the delay, or flashing his badge. It was the look on Rhonda Blake's face when it hit her, when she saw herself clearly for the first time. That was what mattered. Because growing up in a country that teaches fear in quiet, subtle ways, through news cycles, school books, whispered warnings at family dinners, undoing it takes more than a diversity seminar. It takes a personal reckoning, a real confrontation with the ugly truths you've internalized. Not everyone gets there, but Rhonda had started. Maybe that was enough for today. A black SUV pulled up. Emery stepped in, briefcase on his lap. "Airport to Kirkwood," the driver asked. "Yeah," Emery said. "Appreciate it." The car pulled into traffic, blending into the city. The moment faded behind him. But before it vanished completely, one thought lingered. The same one that always comes after moments like this. What if I wasn't FBI? No badge, no federal clearance, no title to deflect suspicion. What then? Would she have gotten her way? Would they have believed her? Would the plane have taken off without him? The truth is, a uniform shouldn't be the only thing protecting a man from someone else's fear. His dignity shouldn't depend on a gold badge. His presence shouldn't require justification. He was just trying to get home. That should have been enough, and that's what this story is really about. Not a badge, not a title, but the dangerous comfort of assumptions and the lives they quietly damage. So next time you feel that flicker of fear, that whisper of suspicion, ask yourself, did they actually do something wrong? Or did I just imagine they might? And if the answer shames you a little, sit with that. Because that discomfort, that's the beginning of change. If this story moved you, share it. If it made you think twice, talk about it. And if you've ever stayed silent while someone else was treated like a threat for simply existing, don't let it happen again.